All right, we're going to talk about Hasus Bamikro. The Sus, the horse, the way it's mentioned in Chumash, in Tanakh, Bechlal. We're going to talk about three specific places where it talks about horses. There's a lot more what to talk about, Sai according to Chassidus, Sai Midrashim. We're going to focus on three specific places. The first place we're going to talk about is in Sefer Iyov. Now, Sefer Iyov is a long conversation. Sefer Iyov is a story in the first 2-3 prakim, and then the last 2-3 prakim. And then the bulk of the Sefer, 40 prakim, is basically a conversation between Iyov and his friends. What happened in short was that Iyov was a very successful person, and then he had a lot of yisudim, a lot of bad things happening to him, and he started complaining about it. Why is he suffering? What's the reason why bad things happen to good people? And Iyov had 3 friends, and they came and they discussed things with him. And therefore, the whole Sefer is basically the conversations back and forth. And towards the end of the Sefer, the Eibishter himself, Kivyachol, mixes in, and the Eibishter himself talks to Iyov, and Hashem is telling him how he's in charge of everything, and everything has a cheshbon. So in the last few psukim over here in Perek Lametes, the Eibishter is telling Iyov how you think you understand things. Will you be able to do things on your own? And then he gives an example of different animals, of things that happen with animals. And then he dedicates about 7 psukim directly to the horse. And he says, were you able to make the horse in such a special way the way it is? Obviously you can't. Obviously it's only Mida Eibishter. So you understand that you can't understand my ways, and therefore don't have any tightness. So it's interesting, these 7 psukim describe the uniqueness of the horse. So what we're going to do is now we're going to go through these psukim and teach them in English, and we're going to give to each pasuk also a little word that's brought down from the scientists, people that study horses, and different interesting facts about horses based on what the psukim tell us. So the first pasuk, the first words are Hacite lasus gavura, which is translated, did you give the horse his strength? So this is a general thing that is yadua, that horses are considered to be very strong. To exactly say how strong a horse is hard to figure out, but they say in general that a horse can schlep 3 times its own weight. So a regular bacher, a regular person, let's say a bacher is probably 150 pounds, the regular bacher probably cannot lift 300, 400 pounds. But by horses, that's shy. And Bechlal, it's yadua that horses also, in machinery, Bechlal, the way to measure the power of a machine, the power of an engine, is by the amount of horsepower that it has. I'm not sure exactly what that means in an engine, but you know, Bechlal, that horses are considered to be powerful, like the pasuk says, Atitin lasus gavura. The pasuk continues, Hasalbish tzavori ra'amo, which means, did you clothe his neck with fierceness? So the pashas we're talking about, the Rama means the mane on the horse's neck, and so they say that when stallions the horses have many different specific names. The general name is horse. Stallions specifically for the male horses. So when they fight, they bite each other's necks. And the mane acts like a sort of armor protecting them from would-be aggressors. So this is part of the gavura. The same pasuk talking about the power of the horse also points out that he has a special rama, which the rama shows on its mane, which shows on its powerfulness as well. The next pasuk says, Hasar ishenu ka'arbe. Hasar ishenu ka'arbe means, did you make him leap like a locust, jumping up like a grasshopper? So that's Yadua Bechlal, that the horses jump very far. And they say that the longest jump recorded by a horse, the horse's name was something, interesting name, that it jumped 27 feet, 6 3/4 inches, 1975. That's the farthest jump that was ever recorded. The picture is unrelated to that record. But that's what the pasuk is saying over here, like whoever saw grasshoppers, grasshoppers, they basically fly, they don't just jump. So the pasuk is saying that the horses also, they have this special koyach, besides their power that was mentioned earlier, they have this koyach, this ability to jump very far like an arba. Regarding the height of horses jump very high as well. So they say that the highest height, again on record, is the horse jumped 8 feet off the ground, 8 feet and 1 1/4 inch. That was in 1949. I wish with the elephant show we pointed this out also. For some reason, all these records happened many, many years ago. But I guess in the world Bechlal, technology is making people lazier. So maybe animals are also lazier. So they don't jump as far as high. Akolponim, the pasuk continues, Hoid nachroi emo. Hoid nachroi emo means the glory of his snorting is terrible. That horses have this snorting, they make the sound of using their nostrils. So they say that the reason why they use their nostrils is to express their mood. This is all quoted from, again, this is all scientists or different people that study horses. So even they understand as well that they communicate their feelings through facial expressions, which what Pasuk says, Hoid nachri ema, that is through his nechiraim, through his nostrils, he shows his ema, he expresses his mood if he's afraid, and also he imposes fear on other people or other animals that are nearby. Yachperu ba'emek. So these words has two pirushim. The word yachperu can mean spying, and this is what the Metzudah says, that they spy in the valley and rejoice with strength. Rejoice actually, but the next words probably. But this yachperu ba'emek is they spy in the valley. So this is interesting that horses b'chlal were always used in battle. But in America, the last time horses were used in battle was 2001. This was right after the Twin Towers when they went to Afghanistan, and the time before that was in 1942. So for over 50 years, the horses were not used in battle. But when they got to Afghanistan, so over there, even though America's army got so strong and based on all the technologies that's out there with tanks and everything and helicopters, but when it came to going into valleys, like the pasuk says, Yachpuru ba'emik, to go into the valleys in Afghanistan, they had no choice but to send in horses in order to spy, to find whatever was necessary. A second taich, what the Malbim says, Yachpuru means digging. That's a simple taich. So the Metzudas taich, Yachpuru means, like it says, the Meraglim were called Lachperes orders, to spy. But the simple taich is to dig. So Yachpuru be'emik is the habit that many horses have, that they're constantly digging at the ground. So the Malbim just points out this is the teva that they have. Doesn't explain the psamaila in it. But the different people that study horses say that the reason why they dig is because sometimes they sense that there was salt on the ground, and the horse that he needs salt, just like lahavdil, a person needs nutrients, needs vitamins to sustain himself. So the horses also need different nutrients, and salt is very necessary for them. So they'll dig at the ground, sometimes in the ground, in the earth, there's some kind of salt. And what happens is that sometimes, after digging for a long time to look for salt, it becomes a habit. And even when there's no salt over there, anyway, he'll just start digging, or if he's bored, in this teva of yachperu ba'emek, which the pasuk is saying is definitely something common that are seen by horses that are constantly digging, according to the pshat of the Malbim. The pasuk continues, v'yosis b'koyach yetze likras noshek, which means, this is like the translation was from before, they rejoice and they go forth towards the arms, that they go into battle. So this is again a conversation of somebody that was asked. This is a person that's a mumch in horses. Somebody asked him, are horses naturally brave, or are they made brave by the riders? The pasuk says that they run in yosis. They're happy to run into battle. So the opinion of people is that they're probably brave from birth. But even though, say, if a rider is afraid, then the rider might make him afraid as well. But you can't make someone that has no shaykhs to be brave, has no shaykhs to be courageous, you can't just instill and encourage. So it has to be that they have it within them, and then the rider can bring it out. But that's from all animals. The animals that are used in battle the most are horses, for this reason, that they have this courage in them. Like the pasuk says, Yosis Pekoyach, they're going there, they're not afraid to go into battle. Yischak lafachad means that they laugh at this scorn sphere. They laugh at fear. They're not nispol from anything. But it's interesting also that they have these different faces that horses make. So according to what's explained is that as say kopanim, this beard is that the reason why they make this funny face with their lip going upwards is sometimes when they smell something. So they basically take the smell of the dust, what's in their smell, and they push it upwards within their face, and inside it goes to a nasal cavity, and over there it helps whatever it gives them, sends them messages. Akopanim, what Yitzchak Lafacha, the word Yitzchak means laughing, and for sure this is a common, I don't know if common, but it's definitely Yadua to see horses making such kind of funny faces. Which means he's not dismayed, neither does he retreat because of the sword. Again, the word of courage, that even though he's in a battle and there's there's weapons all around him, he's not in his bow. So this is weiter another conversation about bringing out the point that when you go riding on a horse, so every time you're asking him to do something, so you don't realize that for the horse, it's basically a life and death situation because he has no ideas what you're asking from him. Cross the water, walk by the tractor, or something comes inside. There's a word that horse riders use called spooking. That horses often get spooked. It's very natural for them to be very afraid because they don't know what's going on with them. But the rider goes and sits on them and just tells them to go forward, and he trusts you, and he goes weiter. So again, it's the same word of the courage that he has, that he's not that even though he has no idea what's happening, but Peril Mamish, the rider tells him to go, so he goes into battle no matter where it is. Olav tirne ashpa lahav chanis v'chidoin. These words mean that the quiver upon him rattles, the blade of the spear and the javelin. These are different types of weapons that are all that the rider, which is also the soldier, is carrying into battle. So this is interesting that horses, Bechlal, when they went into battle always, so the riders had to use lightweight tack and carry relatively light weapons, such as bows, light spears, javelins, and later rifles. But you're not shaykh to go, if you're going into battle with the horse and you bring all your ammunition with you and a heavy stuff, it's not going to be shaykh. So this is the pasuk is saying, a normal thing that the Seder was to carry on the horse, lav, all these different types of light weapons, which were normal for them to carry. This means with tumult and shaking he hollows out the ground, meaning that he runs so quickly as if he's swallowing up the ground. As you know, horses Bechlal run fast. Again, the fastest recorded sprinting was 55 miles per hour. But B'derech they go about 25 to 30 miles per hour. That's what the pasuk is pointing out, the milas of the horse, with all of his keiches that it has. Besides that it runs very quickly. V'lo yamin ki koil schweifer. He does not believe that it is the sound of the schweifer, meaning that he's not, when he hears the sound of the schweifer, which is for battle or stopping the battle. Again, it's all bringing out the courage. We're learning a simple pshat over here, and we're teaching it, but you can understand that the other Mefarshim will add a lot more details at each one of these words, different in yanim of the mile of the horse. Just a word that is said that there were times in battle where even though the rider was knocked out and the rider was wounded, he's sitting on the saddle and can't do anything. Nevertheless, the horses would continue fighting and themselves stoicing and pushing against the enemy, and it showed how much they're connected and on his pole. Even though officially the battle is over, his rider lost, but lo yamin lo kol schweifer doesn't believe in it being over, and he continues fighting till the end. B'dei schweifer yoymar ha'och. This means that to many shofars he says hurrah. Same concept that he just continues. The shayf, he's not in his pole. He's excited about battle and courage. Which means he smells battle from afar, the thunder of princes and shouting. Which Weiter speaks about the koyach that the horses have, that they have this koyach to smell. This is a story that there was, so you can, a group of horses, stories, this happens all the time. The horses that are sitting alone quietly, and then a little away from the herd, the stallion, who's the leader of the herd, seems relaxed, and suddenly he picks up his head, and basically he smelled something. He smelled up a cougar, a mountain lion from far, and he realized that it's time to move the herd to somewhere else, which basically is bringing out that the koyach that they have to smell, which the pasuk is saying, is that he has a chush of a reach to smell from far if a predator is coming. So these are a whole bunch of different interesting things about the horse, about what the pasuk is telling us, the milas and the keches of the horse. So it's an interesting thing. If you ever want to study more about it, that's the place to look. In Eiv, in Perek Lametes, all those words. Obviously, some of the way we were saying it over here, a lot of it was repetitive, but we understand that in Chumash and in Tanakh, every word has a meaning to it. So there's obviously a lot more than what we said, but that's like the beginning. The next topic we'll talk about is the famous mitzvah for the kings, which is in Dvarim, Perek Yudzayin, which the Parsha Shoftim, that it says there's a mitzvah for us to appoint kings. Shem tasim alecha melech asher yivchar Hashem alekecha boi, v'kerev achecha tasim alecha melech. Leisuch alasis alech ishnoch yishalei achicho has to be a king, a Jewish king. Parsha Yudzayin tells us the mitzvah, rak lo yarbe leisusim, v'lo yoshiv esal mitzrayim v'leman har beisus, v'Hashem omar lachem leisesifon lashuv baderech hazoi. And the pasuk says that the king has a responsibility, as a loisa say, he's not allowed to have too many horses, and he's not allowed to bring the people back to Mitzrayim in order to find more horses. And Hashem told you not to go back to Mitzrayim. So the simple title of the pasuk is, the way it's understood, is that the reason why the king is not allowed to have a lot of horses is because if he's going to be into his horses, naturally he'll want to get the best horses, and the best horses come from Mitzrayim, and therefore there's an issue to go to Mitzrayim. So therefore Hashem said he can't have horses. But according to this, it's interesting that according to this pshat, the only reason why he can't have horses is because he might go to Mitzrayim. And as we know, the famous story with Shlomo Melech felt, well, if that's the only reason why we can't have horses, well, I'll have horses. I'll make sure not to go to Mitzrayim. But Lepoil, Shlomo Melech got horses, and he ended up going to Mitzrayim, at least sending his people to Mitzrayim, which then Shlomo Melech later said that I thought that I was smarter, but the Eibishter is obviously smarter than us. So we're going to talk a few pratim, different mitzvahs and dinim. Dinim, this is a mitzvah which only applies to the king. We're not kings, so it doesn't apply to us. But it also applies, first of all, to learn the halachas. And there's a very cute story that we like to share with Reb Reuven Dunin. Reb Reuven Dunin was a big mashpia, passed away a few years ago, and he used to fabring always, and he would always say chamorim. He would always fabring. He's an Israeli, say chamorim, always look at chamorim. So one time at fabring, and somebody asked him, Reb Reuven, why do you always say chamorim? Why don't you say susim? So Reb Reuven said, if we're going to be susim, it's going to cause the Rebbe to do an aveir chas v'shalom, because the Rebbe is our king, and the king is not allowed to have too many horses. So if we're going to be horses, that's an aveir. So maybe we can be chamorim. That's all we have to be. That was it. Akopanim. So the dinim and timing of the mitzvah, again, certain halachas and certain timing. It says that every person has to be mekayim taryag mitzvahs throughout his life, and if not in this Gilgul, he comes back again. Unless mitzvahs of a melech, you're not shaykh to be mekayim them, because even if you come back in a Gilgul, it's impossible for every single Jew to be a king. But at least you learn the halachas, and that way you're mishtatef at least somehow in the mitzvahs. So the dinim of the mitzvah, a number of dinim, there's no Shulchan Aruch on it, it's brought down from the Rambam and others. So the first thing that's brought down is clear, is that it's only usher for a melech. And the reason is because, that's what we said before, since the whole problem is you might go back to Mitzrayim, so a regular person doesn't have the koyach to travel all over the world and go back to Mitzrayim to get horses, and that's why, or go back, or bring back people, or bring other people back with him, that the king might have such an interest. But regular people, the pastors, there's no issue for them to own horses, even though you might say, one second, but a regular person also might enter Mitzrayim. But no, the Torah says only a king, because it's not just yourself, it's making a whole big deal of going back to Mitzrayim. So I always wondered when I learned these halachas today, which people have the most horses in the world, and it's a very hard thing to find out, because when it goes by horses, so it goes by how valuable each horse is. So you can have a person that might have a lesser amount of horses, but his horses are very valuable. But Lepoil, it seems like this is the Sheikh of Dubai. It seems like that he has the most. His name is Sheikh Mohammed. So it seems like he has the biggest horse operation in the world. He has a whole bunch of farms in America and England, different places. He also is the host of the Dubai World Cup, which is the richest race in the richest race of horse racing. So the pastor, he's taka melech, and he's taka very much into his horses, as we see in the psukim that kings are into their horses. Another important halacha which is brought is that the only isser for the king is to have susim batlon, meaning if the king has a big army and he needs horses for his army, then there's no isser for him. If he has a large army, thousands of soldiers, he can have thousands of horses. However, if it's a sus that's tamazay, just to show off, that's the isser. So even one extra horse is usser, but 1,000 horses that are needed are not usser. So that's another din, another in the halacha that only susim batlon. An interesting halacha that some poskim say is that only horses from Mitzrayim are forbidden for him to have. Some poskim will say that any horse is also for any extra horses is also, because once he gets into horses, then he's going to go to the, so to speak, capital of horses, which would be in Mitzrayim at the time, and therefore, even though he doesn't have horses from Mitzrayim, he want to buy horses from Mitzrayim. But so Yeshua know that if his horses that are not from Mitzrayim, then he'll be happy with these type of horses, and he'll buy them from wherever they come, and he won't go to Mitzrayim. But if he gets into horses from Mitzrayim, that becomes an issue. So yes, that the only issue is to have horses from Mitzrayim. The pile today, there's how to decide how many breeds there are. So in some places there's a list of 217 horses. In other places a list of 150 breeds of horses, and a lot of them have different names. Some of them are talking. There's one breed called Egyptian, but if I'm not mistaken, that breed comes in. It's in America somewhere. So today it doesn't seem like anymore the headquarters of the world of horses is in Egypt, Mitzrayim. If I'm not mistaken, Adrab, America has the most horses out of the entire world. But L'Poyel, obviously, since the Eibusha gave us this mitzvah, so the mitzvah remains the same. And even though Mitzrayim today might not have so many horses, Afal Pichein, the Isser would remain. If there would be a king today, it would be the same halach. And even though I just want to point out, even though Mitzrayim doesn't have, but in the Middle East, Bechlal, like Dubai, those places, Bechlal, Africa, whatever, near Mitzrayim, there's taka that there is still a very big koch and horses over there. Timing of the mitzvah. What's the reason, taka? What's happening with Mitzrayim? So we said before. The pasuk says, "Yoshev Esau Mitzrayim." So why talking Mitzrayim? Besides the word of being the headquarters of horses, so we're going to see a different reasons, other biurim or twists on this chat. So one explanation is brought down that Eretz Mitzrayim is a place of desha and Eretz Amokim. It's a place full of grass and valleys. And Re'uya Legadol Susim. Hastes Lepoyel. The reason why Mitzrayim was the headquarters was because the natural habitat of Mitzrayim was a very good place to raise horses, and that's why the horses were there. And that's why that's why they can't have horses, because it's going to end up going to Mitzrayim. Either they'll go there to buy horses there or to breed their horses there, and that's the reason why they can't have too many horses. Another reason brought down is what happens is when the king gets involved in his horses, so he's, instead of taking care of his country, taking care of his kingdom, he ends up having pleasure. And it's so horses are one expression of that. So that's why the Eibusha told the king, you can't have too many horses. Meaning, even though the Torah says it's connected to going to Mitzrayim, but another biur is, in addition to the Isra of Mitzrayim, is that we want the king to be focused on what he's supposed to be doing, and not, which is to lead the country, and not be busy with just having pleasure and having a good time. Another reason is which means that if the king would have too many horses, so even though we said before that the pashtus, whatever he needs for his army is permitted, but some will say that even that is not kedai to have too many horses in the army. And the reason is because once he has too many horses, we know in those times, horses were, like we said before, barichas, that was basically the animal of war. So if he'll have too many horses, he'll think to himself, okay, I'm so strong and powerful, I'm not afraid of anybody else, I don't need the Eibishter to help me, chas v'shalom. And we see Daka by Kriyas Yamsuf, we see Pari came with Sheish Meis Rechev Bocher, he came with all the riders on the horses, also by Sisra, it says over there, with Baruch and Antvoida. He also had, over there he had 900 Rechev Bocher, but when kings have a lot of horses, they feel too short of themselves, and therefore they can lose their betachin, so therefore the Pasuk is telling the king, you shouldn't have too many horses, you shouldn't chas v'shalom lose your betachin in Hashem. Fourth reason is, Ki asusim l'roiv yofyom yizgo behem adinayim. This is similar to the second reason that we said about being into taivus, but here it's more specifically about the gaiva. Now, when people have fancy horses, they're very into their horses, and they're very proud of their horses. So, besides the fact that he forgets to take care of his country, he becomes a bigger balgaiva, showing off for what he has and how nice it is and how beautiful it is. And Memela becoming a balgaiva obviously is a terrible thing, and the Eibusha doesn't help a balgaiva, and therefore the Eibusha told the king he shouldn't have too many horses. The third thing we're going to talk about, which doesn't say clearly directly in the pasuk, but it's a simple chat in the pasuk, and we'll say interesting things about it. And it's actually just recently now. It's these parshas of Mikas and Vayigash is when Pari tells Yosef after Yosef interpreted the dreams. So when Yosef came out, so Pari told him, "Ani Pari, I swear by my name, ubiladecha. I'm now appointing you that without you, la yorim ishes yodei vesraglei b'chol eretz Mitzrayim. Nobody can lift their hand or their foot in the entire Mitzrayim." What does that mean? That Pari now appointed Yosef that nobody can walk out of their houses without Yosef's permission? What does that mean? That you can't lift your hand or your foot without Mitzrayim? Well, people think that it means that you can't do any real business deal. But Rashi's traditional mikra. Rashi says kitargumoi. We look at the Targum and you know what it means. So what does the Targum Taka say? The Targum says, "V'omar Pari Yosef, I know Pari, swearing by him, uvar mi memrach, without your words." La yorim gvar yos yedei. A person cannot lift his hand. Lemeichad zein, which means to hold weapons. V'yos ragle lemirkov al susya, or to lift a foot to ride on a horse. B'chol arad mitzrayim. In other words, a license. Somebody wants to get a weapon, he needs a license. If he wants to get a horse, he needs a license. And the license, who's going to be the authority to decide who gets a license for these two items? Only Yosef. That's the pshat. That's pshat Shemikra. Rashi's Targumai. That there was a need to get a license in Mitzrayim. And this is the Rabbeinu Bachai explains this as well. He says it in Hebrew. Ani pari ani levadi moitzi mitachas shuscha k'mei shamarti rakikitzi ekdal meka. I'm above you. Aval akel tachas shuscha. You cannot own a weapon without permission from you, Yosef. So that's according to the Rashi, Pshuta Shel Mikra. The Targum says that Yosef was responsible for giving out licenses for weapons and also for licenses for riding a horse. And the simple pshat is that if you want a license, just like today, if you want to drive a car, you have to make sure that you know how to drive. So that's why you have to go to the government, whatever the government is responsible for the license, the DMV, whatever it's called, and then you get a license. So Yosef was Kivyochel in charge of that government office in order to give out the licenses. But there's another pshat brought down that is specifically for Chasheva people. There are those that say that in those times it wasn't that every person gets a license if he wants. It was considered a chashuv thing, like a diplomat. In order to ride a horse, you have to be a chashuv person. And the Mele over this is why they had to go to Yosef, that he could agree that you're taka chashuv enough to get a permit to ride a horse. And this is actually, we learned this in the Gemara Megillah. Whoever remembers that one of the things that they changed for Talmai HaMelech is that when it says that Moshe Rabbeinu, when he came to Mitzrayim from Midian, so it says in the pasuk he came riding on a donkey, but they changed it that he came riding on something which carries people. So they want to say the same shot, because if Pari would see that Moshe was riding on a donkey, Pari would be shocked. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't have a horse. All the Chashav people rode on a horse. So that's why they changed it to be Reichev al something which carries people. But according to this pshat, Yosef was responsible for the licenses, but it wasn't mamish every person gets a license. It was specific people. But that also shows to us how interesting how in those times a horses wasn't a simple thing. In order to ride a horse, you had to be a chashav a person. Otherwise, you had no permission to ride a horse. Another pshat that they bring is that the reason why Yosef was in charge of it was because there was a fear of smugglers. Like we said, Mitzrayim was a place of horses, so they were afraid that if every person is going to own a horse, they're going to start taking horses out of Mitzrayim, and other places are going to start having a competition. So therefore, there was a monopoly on who can own a horse. The government of Mitzrayim was in charge of that, and Yosef was put in charge of that office to make sure that nobody steals horses and nobody takes horses out of Mitzrayim. He only gave it to people that he trusted that they're going to be able to keep the horses in Mitzrayim. Similar to this, we find Take that later on, when it came to Shlomo HaMelech, so we mentioned before that Shlomo ended up buying from Mitzrayim. So over there it says that Shlomo Susim came from Mitzrayim. Umikvei soichrei HaMelech yikchu mikvei v'mechir. So what does it mean, umikvei? So Rashi says over there, Malachim aseifas soichrei hasusim b'Mitzrayim. There's a special market for all the horse merchants in Mitzrayim. So soichrei HaMelech Shlomo HaMelech's merchants hayukainin oisim b'mechir b'Mitzrayim in HaMelech. He bought them from the king. They were the ones responsible. They allowed exporting of horses as long as they can control it. They know how much they're letting out. So over there you see Taka that there was a special office from the king's his officers that they were responsible not to let the horses out, and that's the way they explained Taichin what was Yosef Tzaddik, and he's responsible to make sure that the horses remain in Mitzrayim.